morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Fearless Training Raw Knowledge podcast. This is first guest for 2021. Yes, we are back, my friends. It's been a little bit of a break, but we've got some amazing guests. And as always, we're going to have some more insightful conversations, training, nutrition, lifestyle. We're going to amalgamate it all. So I'm here today with Wayne Ratcliffe. Am I pronouncing that right, Wayne?
Correct, you are.
Fantastic, sir. As always, let's start off at the beginning. Give a bit of a context, paint a bit of a picture, tell the people who you are, what you do, and more importantly, why.
First of all, thank you for having me. I turned 50 this year, which is a bit of a milestone. Originally from the UK. My parents moved my sister and I to New Zealand when I was 2. We stayed there for about 7 years and then moved to Australia in about 1979. Been on the Gold Coast pretty much since that date. Love the Gold Coast. Travel a lot, but will always consider Gold Coast home. So schooled here, I guess sportsman at heart, a music lover, more so on the business side of things now that I'm aging. Yeah, pretty much it really.
Yeah, I like it. I like he's come prepared. He's got the notes, this fella. Well, we kind of met over. I guess it would officially be an espresso martini.
Yes.
That you brought around for. We were at the EMF Christmas party, and
luckily it was only one.
Was it? Well, it was for me. Yeah, that's for sure. But it was a good time. I arrived fashionably late, and then we got chatting, me, you, and Nicole, which was very insightful. And you shared some things about your journey. And I thought, hey, look, we've got to sit down and have a conversation. I think there's a lot of knowledge here, so I do appreciate your time. So if someone asks you at this point in time, they say, hey, Wayne, what do you do? How would you describe that?
I guess technology is probably the primary answer. So I guess going back a step to answer some more of the first question, I did start life as a professional cyclist. I did that for 7 or 8 years before blowing both my knees out. Subsequent to that, I went back to school and I studied at TAFE and I studied software development. So got a job as a software developer, stayed in the company for a year and then moved to another company that I've been with now for 23 years. So again, very technology focused, gambling focused as well. So at the moment we're in the process of developing a gambling app or a gaming app with a focus on lottery, taking advantage of the fact there are some very large jackpots around the world. And just now actually we've got $2 billion draws in the US taking place this coming week. So it's giving people the opportunity to play in those large jackpot draws outside of their own country. So we don't operate in Australia, it's all international. So I've been again with the company for 23 years, CEO, my business partner and I founded some new businesses, and again the one I just mentioned we started 4 years ago, and that's been the primary focus. So international team. So thankfully for us, I guess pre-COVID, used to work in distributed environment with people in different parts of the world. So COVID wasn't too challenging for us with the new business on that front. Some of the old businesses have been fairly significantly affected by COVID, but we seem to be recovering, which is nice. So yes, that's the main focus now, is definitely technology.
Yeah, which seems to be probably one of the best avenues to be going down in this technological era. And look, there's so many avenues of someone who's got a multitude of experiences I want to dive into, and I'm just going to sort of keep it a little bit sporadic. But one of the first points that I want to address, or I would like you to extrapolate on, is your background as a professional cyclist. How did you get into that? Was that something that you fell into by chance, or was it like, hey, you know what, I love this cycling thing, you watching Tour de France, things like that? Give us a bit more on that, because I think there's a lot of probably correlations and lessons you can cross over with that and what you've done in the rest of your career.
You know, again, I was a sports lover. My mother always joked I came out of the womb competing. So I played soccer as a kid till I was probably 16. I played cricket and all sorts of other sports as well. So it's always very sports focused. I used to watch Wild Water Sports on a Saturday and a Sunday, and the cycling always interested me. Certain races in Europe each year. But I did, even with that interest, I fell into the sport. We lived in Orang. I worked at McDonald's in Labrador. So I rode my bike there one day, The guy who became my coach was riding past with a group of people and essentially just dragged me into the training session for the next hour or so. And it went from there. So I really did fall into the sport. It was something that I seemed to be, relatively good at from an early age. I did start late. I was probably 17, 18 years of age when I started. A lot of things about cycling I loved. It is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, bar none. The average professional cyclist trains and races about 35,000 kilometres a year, which is what more than most people drive a car. And a lot of that's at a fairly rapid pace. So it's a sport that requires, in hindsight, it requires a lot of business acumen to be applied to it. Goal setting, planning, structuring, commitment, focus. A drive is something you definitely need to have. So I got a scholarship with the Queensland Academy of Sport, which I gave back after about a year and decided to go to Europe and race. So I headed across to live in Belgium. Came from a non-cycling family, so in hindsight I probably picked the wrong place to go and race because I was a little skinny guy who was good at climbing hills. I went to one of the flattest countries on the planet, so learnt some hard lessons there, but thoroughly enjoyed my time, learnt what pain was in all sorts of extreme examples, but blew both my knees out trying to keep up with the guys who at the time were taking fairly large amounts of drugs. So, again, it was a learning experience from so many different perspectives. I learnt how strong I am mentally. And look, if I had my time again, I would do it again, even though it didn't work out the way I planned and it was a career I intended to do. I would do the same things again because there's so many lessons I took from that sporting experience I've applied to business life and life in general, really. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of I think discipline is a word that comes to mind in sporting endeavours and being able to push through, overcome adversity. I talk about it a lot, obviously being in the training sphere, and I'm careful not to perhaps romanticize it too much with clients, but I sort of tell them, I say, hey, look, it can be much more than training, and not in a way of, hey, you need to be an elite athlete, but if you let it, there's a lot of skills that you can learn from improving your body, from going in, from creating routine, from having discipline that you can apply to relationships, that you can apply to business.
Correct.
I do believe from the conversations I've had, most people who are successful in the business realm, they have a fairly well, like a creative side. It's something, whether it's music or art, or they are quite into fitness. They're quite regimented. They're quite routine. Was it hard coming out of that spell? Do you think that there was unfinished business there? Had you not had the knee injuries that you'd like to?
Yeah, look, I was still pretty early on, so hard to say how far I could or couldn't have gone. I had a dream to ride the Tour de France and ride the Olympics. I'm not sure if they were possible, but in some ways, unfinished business. I blew my knee out well and truly back at a race here in Australia that I ended up winning. So I won my last race, which was nice. And the thing that I actually struggled the most with is I had a real bond with my father, who drove me all over the countryside, racing bikes every weekend. So, that was probably the hardest part, realising that was gone, more so than the disappointment I had in not actually achieving that goal, because I knew that there was no more I could do. I had physical limitations with my knees that stopped me from going beyond a certain point. So I was okay with that.
Yeah.
So no regrets, and as I said, I would do it again without a hesitation. And even from a business perspective now, when we have people that apply for jobs that have a sporting background, particularly a high-end sporting background, I definitely look very favourably upon those people because they've got certain character traits.
Yeah.
I don't think it's coincidence. A lot of my friends I have in life now, who I don't see that often, are still a lot of the people I knew from those cycling days because we're very similar in our thinking. I always look very favourably on people who've been high-end sports people before.
Yeah, for sure. And you've still got bikes as well, mate. So
I have
nice wheels there.
Yeah, I didn't ride for probably 8 to 10 years due to the knee problems, and I got dragged back in to do a team's triathlon a few years ago. So that kind of got me back into it, which was good timing because I'd put a bit of weight on, like a lot of people later in life. Realised I loved it, understood my limitations, but just signed up for another one actually in Cairns in June. So
there you go.
We'll see how we go.
It's good. You still got your fingers in the pies.
Definitely,
good, mate.
And I enjoy it.
So why technology? When you said you went and go study, and that was one of the main. It was a software engineer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was again you just thought, you know what, something different? Someone told you, hey, go do this, or it was, okay, I've got an interest in technology. You were always pretty sort of hands-on, pretty savvy in that sphere.
Yeah, I think when technology started coming into schools, I had a real affinity for it, and I was very interested in it. And I think that if I hadn't pursued the cycling career, I would have taken that technology path anyway. So for me, when I retired, it was probably the natural thing to go back to. I was out for probably 8 years, so technology changed a lot. So the upskilling was significant, but I always had the interest. I mean, I was this weird combination of a very nerdy little kid who just happened to be good at sport at the same time. So, I had the jocks who wanted to bash me because I was nerdy, and the nerdy guys who wouldn't talk to me because I was sporty. So,
Caught in the balance.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, there's lots of crossovers between the two. There really are. So, and I'm a true tech head. I've probably got every gadget under the sun. But typically they all have a purpose. I don't like buying things for the sake of buying things. So, if I live for another 100 years to experience technology as it progresses over the next 100 years, I would sign up for that. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you've got one hell of a setup from what I've seen. It's definitely a dream setup for a lot of people, I think, with the amount of screens. I wouldn't know where to start with all of that. What do you think some of the early challenges were for you within like technology and when you were studying? You find it went pretty smooth, like you took it all in your stride? You were, like you said, a nerd, a whiz kid, you were a straight A student, or did you kind of struggle with more? Perhaps it was, I guess if you were sporting, maybe the hands-on was just as easy.
Yeah.
Or were there roadblocks along the way where you were like, I'm not really sure about this, and perhaps there's a different route?
I think we come from a family where we develop late, and I mean that mentally, physically, and even probably emotionally. So, I was always the second smallest kid in the class for whatever reason, So I was always told my whole life, you're too little, you're too young, you're not educated enough. There's always been people, the naysayers, who tell me why I can't do something, which to me has always been a red rag.
I can relate.
So I've always felt like I'm the underdog, and I think with that comes this drive and determination. So I like being the underdog. I prefer when people underestimate me. It's all the more satisfying when you prove them wrong. So, did I have challenges? Sure. But I think most of them were externally applied rather than me putting limitations on myself. I've always believed I can do whatever I set my mind to. So I always had that very quiet confidence I could achieve whatever I chose to achieve in. So, in whatever context that was. So, I think I've proven just about everybody wrong so far. Still a long way to go in life, but I think most of the naysayers have been proven to be wrong along the way. So,
This is good. Yeah, I definitely relate with that, and probably not a bad thing. It seems to be a lot of people who strive for success are those who are underestimated or feel that they need to be or do more, which can be hindering at some point, but for the most part it always keeps you one step or two steps ahead of the game, rather than sort of being complacent and accepting perhaps what you think is possible. It's like, no, I believe there's more, there's something else, and yeah, you tell me I can't, watch me I can. And that can be the biggest sort of elixir to success, or to be able to drive your passion where it needs to be.
I'm definitely not afraid to fail. Not so much when I was younger, but once I got a little bit of confidence in life, I've never been afraid to fail. I'd rather go hard and fail than not try in the first place, or not try hard enough. And you hear the phrase, people need to give themselves permission to succeed, or permission to fail. And I think it's important to give yourself permission to fail, but don't use those as reasons for failure. Because often people will say, if I get too busy, I won't be able to do it. But then that becomes their excuse. So I think you've got to be very careful between those two things. There's too many people are just afraid to do something. It's like, take the first step. If you want to lose weight, go to the gym. Actually, just walk out your door and go for a walk. You don't need to spend money. It doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes you to make that first step. And I've always been good at sort of taking that first step, I think, in life.
Yeah, great.
I've been slapped down plenty of times, don't get me wrong. So,
I think getting over the edge is the hardest thing, isn't it? I always use the metaphor of abseiling. It's like, it's hard. Psychologically and physically, you can be paralyzed by analysis by paralysis, or whatever it is. And but then once you get going, you've got momentum.
Yeah.
It was a maths teacher who said to a student some proverb, He says, oh, I don't know, I can't figure out the equation. And he goes, well, just do something. And he goes, yeah, but I don't know how to approach it. He goes, yeah, but if you do something, you'll move in a direction, and direction creates momentum. So action creates momentum actually gets you to where you want to go eventually.
Yeah.
That's something that you generally don't understand in life until you actually get out and do it. But while we're on the topic, what would you believe to be some of your biggest failures? And or to flip that around, lessons learned? And there's a few in there. I'm
very hard on myself. It's probably not something that I verbalise to many people, but I'm extremely tough on myself. Like there's things, we've been working this new project for 4 years. It's taken a life of itself. It should have taken 2. And even with all the careful planning, preparation we did, it's still, it's blown out and doubled in time frame to get to where we are now. So there's things that, I would have rather spend more time with my father, spend more time with my daughter. So it's probably more the personal things that I reflect in the near past on. And I wouldn't call them failures so much as just things like, in hindsight, I would have spent more time on both of those things. But, I'm one of those people too, if you commit to a project, you're either in or you're not, and I do commit hard. So, a lot of what I do is so I can actually provide for my family. And that's been the driving thing for me. My father was a workaholic, I don't know if he remembers, but I went to a school here called Aquinas College, and he'd pick me up some afternoons from the computer lab, and he would supposedly finish at 5 o'clock. Well, I've been stood there sometimes at 7 p.m. in the rain, waiting for Dad to come and pick me up, which was incredibly frustrating at the time. But I understand now as a father why he did it, and he was committed to a job. He took the job on, so he made that commitment to his employers, and he was serious about it. So I admire that in him now in hindsight. So failures,
and again, it could be feedback, because is there any such thing as failure really? Because it is just feedback, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I don't think there's anything in my life where, I've been married and divorced. I'm very happily married a second time now, so you could look at the first marriage as a failure. I didn't go into that marriage expecting to be divorced, but sometimes life just doesn't work out that way. So no, I don't have a lot of things. I think most things that I've tried to do in life have either kind of reached a conclusion, either one that I was hoping to get, or an outcome that I had no control over, like the knee problem with the cycling. So I think a lot of people just give in too easily, and it's a double-edged sword. I don't have it in me. I can't give in, and I'm not talking about in arguments. I'm talking about when I devote myself to something I'm in. I commit and I focus hard.
Yeah.
So and sometimes when you get that way, you're so blinkered that you don't look to the side when you're doing things. So I've learnt to reflect a lot more than I have in the past and review what I'm doing and making sure I'm on the right track. So they're probably one of the key lessons I've learnt from things not working out the way I hoped they would.
I see a lot of, not just younger people, but older people as well now in relationships that are toxic, stale, inauthentic. From someone who's been, through the marriages, you've got life experience, what advice would you offer to people perhaps that are in relationships or even are single, or what things that perhaps they can look for to know when to commit and when to perhaps have that conversation and go a separate way? Because as you said, I think a lot of people give up, but I think on the opposite side of that, a lot of people settle. And I think that's a dangerous combination, thinking that, okay, this is kind of it, this is as good as I'm going to get, don't get me wrong. I don't think you're ever going to get utopia, but I think you've got to get clear on what you want with the person that you're going to spend the majority of your time with.
Yeah, I think, again, you've got to honour that commitment you make in the first place. And I think too many people say the words and don't really listen to the words. But it comes a point where, if you're not happy or your partner's not happy, it's better just to call it a day. And this is nothing negative about my ex-wife at all. But we just kind of got to that point. We met when we were very young. I didn't know who I was as a human being. I talked before about being late developers in our family. I was probably close to 30 before I actually really knew in life what I wanted to do. Again, post-cycling, but just in general. I didn't become a father till later in life. So I think sometimes you just got to recognise the fact it's had its course. And if you can go about the unwinding nicely, then it's about happiness these days. And I wasn't happy, and I'm sure my ex-wife wasn't happy at the time. So as hard as it was to do, it was the right thing to do. Now, divorce is messy when it comes to financial side of things. We lived in a multi-million-dollar house in Sovereign Island. We had a multi-million-dollar apartment on Hamilton Island. I drove a $250,000 car. So I knew that when I was walking away from that that was all at risk, and I was okay with it. But I had the conversation with myself. I sat down and I thought, are you unhappy enough to leave? What it is, what are you chasing? It's just happiness. It's not about the money. Are you prepared to lose everything to actually give this a shot? And the answer was yes. And I wish my ex-wife all the happiness in the world. It was a good decision for me because I'm happy now.
On happiness as well, I think this is a good. I want to segue back to a couple more things on relationships, but you mentioned the houses, the cars. As someone who's had the luxury to be able to experience that, there's a lot of people on the opposite side of the fence who they chase that all their life and then they just end up sort of unhappy, right? Or even when they get it, they realize it's not the main thing. Do you believe the novelty wears off with things like that, where it's, you get it, it's great, and then there's something else, and then it's sort of backwards, going back to, well, what are the things that I really love?
Yeah, we had a quick conversation before we started today. I won a business coach at my daughter's school function once, and it's a lovely guy called Jeff Downs from who was in Sydney at the time, and he rang me the first call, and he asked me all these very good questions just to understand who I was as a person. And the second call the next week, he had a few more questions, and he just hit me with 2 questions, and they stopped me dead in my tracks. And I won't forget this till the day I die. And he said to me, what is it you're chasing? A, and B, when is enough enough? And I remember thinking, wow, I don't know the answer to either of those questions. I don't know what I'm chasing because, and I'll talk about a little bit of brainwashing with the institutes of sport of the world, because they get you so focused on being a killer to achieve their goals ultimately, as much as they are yours. And every time you achieve a goal, you set a new one. You achieve a goal, you set a new one. But there was never actually a point where they said, okay, if you get to this point, it's enough, because it never was enough for them. So that's an attitude I took from my sporting life into my business and personal life. And and it's damaging if you don't get control of it. So for the first time in my life, I stood back and said, okay, what is it I want? And I didn't actually know. Here's a guy who's been setting goals his entire life, and when I'm actually asked the question, I couldn't answer it, and I didn't know what was enough. So going through a divorce and then a new marriage, changed your perspective on life. And my wife now, Nicole, very successful in her own right, batshit crazy in a lovely way, and I say that in a very similar way to me. We get on like a house on fire. We love spending time together, but she was that career person as well. And I think if someone had asked her the same question, she probably wouldn't have been able to answer it either. She could have said, well, I want 10 restaurants, I want 100 restaurants, but she got 100, she want 1,000 restaurants. I don't think she'd ever really set a ceiling and said, when I get to that point, I'm just going to be happy. So one of the things we've tried to focus on, and starting again, is that let's celebrate the little wins sometimes, because I don't think I ever did celebrate the wins, and it's not like, okay, I spent 3 years getting to this point, now I'm happy. It's like, okay, you set a plan, it's got macro goals long term, you've got micro goals to get there. Celebrate the micro goals. Set little things in front of you that are realistic, and when you get to that point and you achieve it, celebrate. And celebrate doesn't mean go out and get drunk necessarily. It's sit back for 2 minutes and go, pat on the back. I set a goal, I had a plan, I achieved it. Fantastic. It's a very motivating thing. And I think whether it's problems in life or training towards a goal, people they have a start and an end. There's no in between. And this is where I think, a business coach or personal trainers play a really important role in life, because you need to understand who the person is and what they're trying to achieve. So then you can put a plan together for them to actually achieve those goals. And people often say to me, with gyms in the family, why would you need a PT? Is it just to get me out of bed? Sure, to a point, but I think they're the ones that sit you down and actually ask those questions in the first place about where you're trying to go to. Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to get fit? Do you want to stop? Whatever it might be. Do you want to get ripped? What are your goals? So I can put a plan in place for you, and we can work together to achieve those things. And I think fundamentally, this is where people fail in life, is they just don't go through that process. Which is a longer way of answering your question. Again, these celebrations along the way are important. So Nicole and I are very good at doing that now.
No, it's good. There's a lot of value and a lot of great points you make there. I think in business, it is important to celebrate, even in life, because there's something I reference, the book, The Happiness Advantage, and it talks about, the 7 principles that contribute to happiness. But more to the point, we're always putting happiness on the horizon. It's always, you get ambitious. Oh yeah, cool. Next. Or I'll be happy when I earn this now. Or now we've hit that metric. Now I'm going to be happy when I've got this. And that's a vicious cycle. Like you said, if you don't sit down sometimes and go, like you said, it doesn't have to be a massive celebration, getting pissed. It can just be, let's just sit down. Let's take a moment. Let's enjoy it. Let's have
recognition.
And go, you know what? Great. That's good. Because
nothing's more motivating than actually doing that either. It's like, wow, I've just done that. Now I can do the next one. And it becomes a waterfall effect in a very positive way. And you asked before, we were talking about the travel. I mean, the thing I love about travel, and this will surprise many of the people that know me, they probably think it's, going to amazing cities and going to great restaurants. And I guess to give you some sense of travel, in a 4-year period of time, my wife and I did nearly 60 complete laps of the planet. So that's not backwards and forwards trips. That's actually in kilometres, 60. So we did excessive travel. And, when people ask me what I enjoy about it, the experience of packing, it's a chore, but I actually don't mind it. The excitement before you go to the airport. Sitting on a plane with my wife for 12 hours in quiet time, I love.
It's a form of therapy.
Sitting in the lounge and, having a glass of champagne and something to eat. Her and I having alone time. Getting to the hotel and unpacking, exploring the place. I mean, I love everything about the travel. It's not just the flashy restaurants.
No. It's the whole process of it.
It is.
I think I can empathise with you there from someone who was fortunate to travel when I was young. I just love airports. It's almost like it's anchored within me. So when I go to an airport, even if I'm not, I get excited.
Yeah.
I just love that. And like you said, there's things that are like, it's not sometimes pleasant to go through check-in, but I enjoy it all.
Yes.
I just associate an airport with a happy place and a place of freedom.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, being able to do that with someone who's perhaps as busy as yourself, it's almost like, you go on the toilet, you sit down, you're on your phone. It's one of the only times of the day most people actually have where they're not stimulated by something, but now the phone's in there. It's like that quiet time. But when you're on a plane and you've got movies and you got this and you got that, but there is a point where it's like there is that eerie sort of quietness, and it might be that time where you can sit down with your wife, have a conversation, or even be with your own thoughts, which I think is powerful. And I don't know what your opinion is on this, but listening to a lot of conversations, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts myself. One of the great tools that a lot of creative minds use, and minds such as yourself, which are very busy, very manic, very creative, to sort of still the quiet or let the thoughts come, but then try to find precision, or try to find, okay, actually, where's this clarity coming from, or where's the next move, is by taking, some people do up to 2 hours a day or 10 minutes where they just sit and do nothing.
Yeah.
And it might be a bit of quiet music, but there's no TV, it's just, or whatever it is to you, it might be out on the bike, and those thoughts, they come, they go like waves, but then you'll get, after a while, some sort of quiet, some sort of clarity, and then you might get, oh, actually, that's that sense of direction I need, or that's kind of what I was looking for.
I've always found exercise for me particularly stimulating. I'm sure there's a scientific and chemical reason why this is the case, but particularly for me, riding my bike, because I'm so comfortable riding on the roads, having done it for so long, I can kind of zone out. I'll often go for 30, 40 minutes and go, wow, did I stop at the traffic lights? And I know I did. It's all automatic. So I'm fortunate that I can actually zone out while I'm doing that. And I often stop. I'm taking, audio notes when I'm riding along. I'm stopping, putting things in my phone. And it sounds a bit manic. It's not really that way. It's just, I find it very creatively stimulating, the exercise. If I go and work out at the gym and do weights, I don't get the same thing. But I definitely do from riding my bike. So, riding my bike for me is, yes, it's fitness, and I still thoroughly enjoy it, but I know I get a lot out of it. So if I have a problem I'm trying to solve, I'll jump on my bike and go for a ride for an hour. And often I'll find a solution while I'm doing it. So
it's similar to almost, I find myself when I'm on the phone, I pace. I actually get up and just pace. I talked to a few of my friends about this, especially if it's business related or it's something important or creative. And I'm like, I just find that I have to move.
Yeah.
Like, movement is associated with it, which is strange in a way, but I think there are a lot of people who find that movement, having some sort of passive, it's not to the point where it's like you have to be fully present, like you said, it becomes autonomous, but having that little bit of movement almost gives you a little bit of energy in the background. Or it's like when you're working, you might have a certain bit of music on. If it's too stimulating, you start singing and joining in and beating the table and whatnot. But if it's just enough of an ambient in the back, it's just enough to keep a little bit of the fire going, and then it's like, oh, actually, it's a better workspace.
And I think, from that you get reflection too, don't you? And I think that I talked about it before. I think sometimes you get so routine based. Often it's an outside party that stops you in your tracks. And I guess using the travel analogy for me, I was so used to going to airports for 33 years. This is the longest I've been home since I was 17 with COVID. And Nicole, in the early days, she's going overseas, she's excited, and for me it's like another day at the office. It's just another plane, another airport. I've got to make sure I get to the airport on time and get checked in. I don't miss my flight. I've got meetings scheduled. So what I didn't realise is, I think she timed me one day, I could get from the car park to the lounge in 11 minutes. And she tried to stop me a few times, and I was just so focused on my little routine and getting in there. I never stopped to enjoy the experience. But she's like, I'm going away. I want to actually go and look at the gift shops, and I want to walk around and see what people are doing. So every once in a while you've got to get jarred back into consciousness and go, okay, you're getting too routine based at the moment. You're not really enjoying the ride along the way. Stop and smell the roses again, trying to celebrate those things. So that's where she's been very good for me as well.
You do often find actually as well that, again, it's this whole constant backwards concept. Sometimes you've created the freedom, but now you're not enjoying it. It's like, hang on, the whole reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is so I can do what I want to do.
Yes.
And I have the luxury of, because it's like, point A, point B, right? You get very sort of like goal orientated. So hang on a minute, let me stop and take a look around. Let me, we've got time. Or let's get here a bit early. Like, we don't have to, we've got that. We can be there for that. But we can go over here. We can have a bit of a bite to eat. We can fuck around in a gift shop. It's like, that's all sort of part of the basics of life, isn't it? We forget sometimes the simple pleasures which tie together the big experiences. It's almost like a good reference you were saying when you're on your bike. Did you stop at the traffic lights? I've often just drove to the gym. I'm not even going to the gym. I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm not meant to be going. I've driven to the gym. I'm like, I was meant to be going somewhere else. And I've just autonomously put a podcast on and driven to the gym. I'm like, what are you doing? It's or even when I remember when I changed gyms, I'd still drive to the old gym. Like, I'm not going here anymore. I'm at EMF, so.
I'm very big on, again, goal setting, structuring and planning and those types of things. Not in every aspect of my life, but what I've learnt, again, 50 years of age now nearly, is you've got to have a balance between the two. You can get so focused on a routine sometimes that it almost becomes problematic, and you don't realise how that's being perceived to other people. The first time Nicole refused to let me get through the gates and go to the lounge, and take her time to go through, I was literally sweating. It was almost like a panic attack.
Like, I can't, I've got to do this.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's trying to find the balance. And again, going back to lessons learned in life, I think trying to find that balance has been something that, I'm trying harder to do more and more. So it's always difficult when you've got a big project, in the wings. But there are little things you can do to make that journey a little bit less structured and, not dynamic and not as enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I want to talk a lot about travel because I know it's something you're passionate about, like myself. But I want to go back and talk about Nicole. She's obviously a big part of your life. She's a major source of inspiration and energy. Like you, she's very goal-driven.
Yes.
She's 100 miles an hour. When you met Nicole, and I kind of want to tie this into a relationship thing, what was it about Nicole that really sort of sparked something inside of you? And I guess this is the big question. How did you know that Nicole was someone, and I won't say the one because I don't think there's one, I think there's many, but someone that you wanted to, spend the rest of your days with? Like, is it a very clear-cut set of emotions, or is it a series of events that sort of leads to this sort of growing attraction where you go, you know what, this person's all I think about, this is who I want to spend my time with? I ask this question as someone who, is curious about love, who's experienced, I think, shades of it, but not in the full form. And I'm always interested to know, how do you know? It's sort of the whole, like, what's the meaning of life question. It's a big question, but I'm interested to get people's perspectives, especially someone who's been in multiple relationships and has life experience and is well-traveled, which I think is a key element. And I'll just add this on quickly. And the reason why is because I think if you've traveled, you have different lenses of which to see the world, and you realize and understand that there are more flavors than the one that exists within your backyard. And I think that is a really underrated factor. for a lot of people. I'm not saying, people who marry their childhood sweetheart, it's wrong, but I just think, hey, if you expose yourself to more experiences, to more cultures and communities, you may find that you admire what you have back home, but also you may find that perhaps something in a different part of the world is a bit more you, shall we say.
I think, when my ex-wife and I decided to separate, as I was travelling around, I remember for the first time probably thinking, okay, look at life through a different lens. Is there, what am I looking for in a person to fall in love with? Does that person exist? And even reflecting on 20 plus years of travel and business and before cycling, I realised I'd never really come across that person who just stopped me dead in my tracks. And part of it probably was because I was in a marriage and I was committed to that marriage at the time. So as life seems to do with me, every once in a while it has to slap me, and has to slap me really hard. Or just has to stop me dead in my tracks. And in Nicole and I got set up on a semi-blind date. So it was her sister-in-law and a good friend of mine, his wife at the time, having a champagne one night, and just, somehow randomly decided that her and I should meet. We'd be good for each other. So this date was set up. It was an EMF Christmas party at some point. And I didn't go there looking for love. I just, I was busy. So, and sat down and we just clicked. It was just natural. Nothing was forced. Conversation flowed. We realised we had similar beliefs in life. Nicole's Nicole, so from her perspective, it was an interview.
She's very direct.
She is.
She's very direct.
And, and she wasn't being business-like about it. It was more so, I guess she was at a point in her life and she knew what she wanted in a person. And if there wasn't a connection there or whatever, or different values and beliefs in life, then, hey, let's have a few drinks and call it a night and see you later. So, which I respected about her. And, I've got nothing to hide. So, I got every question under the sun. So, but we just clicked, and we just, to this day, after, 7 years, I think it is now, we just enjoy spending time together. So, she's a big, brash human being, and I think sometimes the public persona and the private persona of Nicole are two different people. She's very loving and very caring. When she's out and about, she's full on. So, so I see the two different sides of Nicole, and I think being in hospitality her whole life, she's always had to have that public profile and a certain approach to what she does. So it just there was a fit. It didn't feel forced. We got to know each other a period of time, and it just worked. I mean, I don't think there was. It's not like I walked in and fell in love when I first met her. It wasn't that at all. It was just, okay, well, here's an interesting person. I find her attractive and really stimulating to talk to, and that's a big thing for me. I get bored very, very quickly. So does Nicole. So, we're both very high energy people who have very similar beliefs in life. So we have very few differences, and people who say opposites attract, and I'm sure maybe from a sex point of view it might, but I think in a long-term relationship, I think that can be challenging. It depends what the differences are. But if you've got fundamental differences in how you approach your life, I don't see how that's going to work long term. Whether it's a business partner or it's a life partner, I don't understand how that's going to work unless you come to an agreement on certain things. And I look back, I guess, and we're both 40-something people that met late in life, and we're probably at that point very self-aware, very opinionated, very strong in our beliefs and who we were, quite forceful personalities. So when you look at that working, I think it says a lot for the lack of differences in our relationship. Even down to, the types of furniture we like and those types of things, we're very similar in that respect. So, and we're both crazy. I mean, we work hard and we like to play hard. So we don't play very often, but when we do play, we'll go out and have a couple of bowls of wine and have a great night. So
that's good.
And, and look, I've used an example before. If a friend rang me and said, hey, let's go to the pub and I've got dinner organised with Nicole, I'll happily decline. And no disrespect to all my friends, I'd rather have dinner with my wife, or even my family in general, I guess, than necessarily with friends. So you can't force it, part of the decision-making process when I left, I said, was financial as well. I just wanted to be happy. But I probably got to a point where I thought, the person that I want in life, who I feel is going to make me happy, probably doesn't exist. So am I okay to be alone for the rest of my life? And I was. So, I come from a family, my dad's side, where you could probably stick us on an island on our own for 10 years and we're fine. We don't need to be around people. So, it just works. I don't think there's any secret sauce and there's no magic way to go about it. I think, it's like anything in life. if you want to set outcome, you've got to put yourself in the right environment. If you're trying to succeed in a particular field, then you've got to create that environment around you to help you succeed. If you are stimulated by people like talk about business or they're sports oriented or it's music, put yourself in those environments where you can meet those types of people.
Yeah.
And take that first step. Too many people just sit back and wait. I've never done online dating. I don't know how I'd go with it if I had to. I like meeting people. I've always liked meeting people. It's one of my favourite things about travel is meeting new people.
Yeah, that's a conflicting topic, the online thing, but I think there's a lot of value in there if people listen back or they've been attentive with what you said and not forcing it and creating the environment and having acceptance. There's definitely a lot to be said about that. And I think even for the younger folk as well, where there's expectations of like dates and people, even if you are not well experienced, don't waste time, don't fuck around. Like, just go for a walk with someone, do the old dog bum sniff, metaphorically speaking. Have a catch up, say, hey, look, let's just keep it casual. Let's just go for a walk, let's go for an ice cream, whatever it is. Don't bloody sit in a movie theatre. You're not going to speak to someone. Don't set up a high pressure date. It is literally just go for a drink, keep it casual, and be like, hey, let's just check each other out. If we like each other, you know what, we'll go for a second one. If not, no hard feelings, carry on. If we did this, I think people would save a lot of time and they'd stop wasting other people's time. But it's almost like people need to fill a void where they go, perhaps people are not like yourself, where they're okay with their own company. I think spending time by yourself is really valuable because you can start to perhaps understand what you want and getting clear on that. But people sort of need to go, well, something's better than nothing, where it's like, well, perhaps nothing is better than something until you find something that's worth having.
A lot of people in life, it must be hard, for whatever reason, struggle to be alone. And that's when I often see people making bad decisions. And again, it's a sporting thing, it's a business thing, it's a personal relationship thing. They just don't want to be on their own, so they end up making a choice, which could be the wrong one, and often is, rather than actually just waiting, and I think there's so much randomness in the world that, you can't force an outcome.
This is true. I mean, I am of the belief now that I think, we're, excuse me, there's a lot that we're not in control of, which I think we shouldn't waste our time with. And there's a lot that we are. And I think from a business sense, you are the driver of your ship, right? And you can you be the architect of your own world. But at the same time, I think understanding that there are powers beyond our control, i.e. sometimes relationships and love, like you said, you can do your best, you can do everything, you can create the environment, you can take action, but ultimately what will be. And I think there is something to sort of say about surrendering to that and understanding that is a more, without just sitting back and expecting life to come to you, because there is a fine line here with what I'm saying, but having that sort of more organic, authentic approach where you said something before when you met Nicole, you said it was effortless. That seems to be a key thing. You meet some people sometimes like getting blood out of a stone, whether it's business or whatever it might be, and it's like, fuck, this is actually hard work. Where when you meet someone, even if it's a friend or it is a romantic interest, and it just seems to flow. A key word for me is understanding. I think when I meet someone who understands me, and it's not I agree, me too, it's a no, you're on the same frequency here, you're vibrating on a similar level. And having those ethic and moral codes, like the fundamentals as you referenced, but I think that's got to be bang on. That's where I think the difference is. It can't be for a long term, and then like you said, it can be, wow, you guys look very different on the surface, but underneath, like, there's got to be those core values.
Definitely, and there's yin and yang with Nicole and I, which I think there needs to be in a relationship. And I've always said to Nicole, our differences are our strengths. And I probably look at that from a business sense. She's the HR, the people person. I'm the numbers guy. I'm the planner, the structure of the numbers. The legal, the tech. And those two things blend very nicely together. And that's what I'm saying. As I said before, I watch people select business partners, and there's no due diligence as such. And I wouldn't use that word in a personal sense, but it's the same process you're going through. Do I like this person? Do I agree with their morals and ethics? Are we going in the same direction? Could we work well together? People just don't have those conversations at all, or those thought processes. And again, it's the same with everything. So I think it's just people don't stop enough and just think before they move.
Yeah, I think people don't want to have difficult conversations. that is often the defining thing. It's like the old maxim goes, difference
So
between where you are.
then we'll struggle for the next 10 years, and I won't have a difficult 10-minute conversation, but I'll spend 10 years of my life being unhappy.
Yeah.
You know, so, and then these are just things I've learned. I mean, I went through a stage in my early cycling career where it's a lonely sport. You know, like you're training so hard every day that you don't get a chance to meet people, and you get lonely. You know, I had one or two girlfriends, I think, at the time that, without being awful, it was probably more convenience. It was companionship than necessarily being something I thought was going to end up in marriage. So, I mean, we're human beings. We like to hang out with people.
Yeah, exactly. There is always that element, as much as there are now many categories that people sort of associate with, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. Ultimately, we all want to feel loved. We all want to be enough. You know, that I think that's the soul, without getting too sort of woo-woo about it. I mean, it is love. It always comes back to love. Everything is kind of, that's why we're here.
And I think if you don't know yourself well enough, how do you fall in love? If you don't know who you are, how do you know what you're looking for? You know, and I didn't know who I was, as I said before, until my 30s. Now I have a very strong sense of who I am and what I like and dislike in life. You know, so I think, you know, that discovery process as a human being, people have to do themselves first. And part of that's experience. You know, traveling the world was an amazing way for me to learn about who I was, you know, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, you know, what my concerns in life were, you know, what stimulated me, what bored me, what concerned me. And being, you know, my daughter now 17, going to university, she's got the travel bug too. So I hope she does it, because she'll learn more about herself doing that in a shorter period of time than she would just staying on the Gold Coast.
Absolutely, and that's a great dovetail into travel, which I wanna go into a little bit more now. I'm in agreement. I think travel is one of the best educations you can get. I think it's severely underrated. I think it's associated with different things. Rather, people are saying, "Oh, yeah, travel, you're just gonna have a good time. Just get it. It's a holiday." It's like, well, no, it's not. I mean, it can be, but if you travel and you do it over a more long-term period, or you go to different countries, different cultures, you're not just going back to the same hotel in Thailand again and again. It's like, you know, go out, get a little bit uncomfortable, see the world. Obviously, at the minute, you know, the elephant in the room with COVID, it's a little bit hard, but again, you know, that will dissipate. It will go. Foresight will happen. People are getting too caught up in that. But what would you, apart from what you've already said on travel, what are the things that come to mind for you? You said, you know, that it helped you develop you as a person and who you are. Are there any, I guess, biggest wins or key learnings that come to mind? Or perhaps give us real life examples of when you've been in different countries and you've had, whether it was a small thing that led to a big thing, or an experience or a story where you were like, wow, you know what, that was super valuable.
I think, you know, taking a step back, I mean, the thing I learnt most in reflection from travel is understanding and appreciation for different people and cultures. And I think, you know, here we are in Australia. It's a wonderful country with wonderful people, a very multicultural country as well. But, you know, and we do like to travel, but I think traveling gives you know, people can be different, and that doesn't have to be a problem. You know, and when you actually sit down and understand and listen to their stories and their upbringing, and you understand how they became who they are, then I think you have a better understanding and appreciation for people being different in life. So I think that we're very, you know, quick to judge people in life who don't fit the mold, whatever mold that might be.
Yeah.
You know, and again, that's got a business sense to it, and a sporting sense, and a personal sense as well. So that understanding and appreciation was huge for me. Travel can be tough, you know, it can be very lonely. And being a young kid as a cyclist in Belgium, I can tell you, it was a very tough period of time. You know, you've got people there whose motivation isn't necessarily your best interest. You know, so I've learned in life that, you know, you need to determine who the people are who are trying to get something out of you, or who want to get to know you. And probably my most famous saying, and my wife now is definitely a believer, is, you know, I'm an optimist in life, but I'm a pessimist with people. You know, and when I meet people, I'm always nice and friendly, but in the background, I'm just, you know, I'm trying to get a sense for who they are. If it's a social environment, it's a different setting. If it's a business environment, again, it's different. But I want to, what's your motivation? You know, I've got business colleagues we've done a lot of business with for a long period of time who are now some of my best friends, and I believe you can do both. Because if the outcome you're wanting is mutually beneficial, then, you know, it's got much more chance of succeeding than one person just trying to, you know, extract something from it themselves, be it money or whatever else. So I saw, for me and particularly with other good cyclists, I saw people being used and abused for an outcome. So, and again, I saw that in business too. So I think that is another big takeaway for me. I don't think I had too many scenarios where I went, okay, wow, that's a life lesson I should learn. They're more big picture things, I think. I definitely learned in my own self. You talk about limits. I didn't know what a limit was until I became a cyclist. I thought I raced hard in Australia. My first race in Europe was just horrendous. It was raining, it was cold, it was 160 kilometres, and they were going at ridiculous speeds the whole time. I mean, I barely remember finishing. It was that hard. And then I went back and probably did the same race, X months later, and it wasn't as difficult because my expectations on what a limit was kept changing. And I eventually got to a point where I reached the limit because I passed out dead cold on a bike one day. And I woke up going, guess I just found my limit. My body just shut down.
Fine. So,
and it's one of those sports where you'll find those extremes. So, they're just, I think they're takeaways from me on who I am. I think, again, it goes back to the point before. Until you understand who you are in life, it's very difficult to understand who you should be meeting in all walks of life and who you get on well with and who you wouldn't.
Yeah, the doing business and friendship is, I think as long as there's respect, it's more beneficial, as you said. I have found in my experience as well as speaking to others, if you're going to spend an amount of time with someone, it's probably best you have something in common with them. And like you said, as long as it's mutual and you're both, getting the desired result, why can't it work? Why would you ever want to do business with someone you wouldn't trust?
Exactly.
Or someone that you couldn't really call your friend, unless it's an exchange of services, but it's a one-time thing. It's like, okay, and you need to fix something on my car, that's fine. Yeah. As long as you're professional. But I think if you do an ongoing business with someone, like we spoke about before this, it's a lot of that business is done in a sort of casual fashion. It's, hey, let's go for dinner, let's go for a drink, or you end up doing that. Those people open up to you. You actually learn a bit more about them, not this sort of just professional facade. It's like, oh, you're actually a real human. You've been through this, you do this. Oh, you like that, you listen to this. We grab onto that, I think, as humans. And that sort of gives us, like you said, without people that don't fit the mold. It might be like, well, we didn't really know what the mold was, or we didn't really know who that person was until we give them an opportunity in a different setting or a different environment. And then we go, okay, actually, this person, wow, they're into this or they're into that. And it's not about having all the same interests, but it's a good indication, I think, that probably, as you would know, would provide better business relationships that are not only long but fruitful as well. Yeah.
I think, there's been many negatives to COVID. I think there's been a lot of positives too, but, one of the negatives I've seen is that, there's always been a certain amount of selfishness in the human race. And I think I've seen that deteriorate and get worse over the past 12 months. I've seen people, you drive around and people are less tolerant now when they're driving. You see it in the shopping centres. And I feel like there's this fundamental shift in the human attitude, which, if we're not careful, is going to happen and there's no coming back from it. And that's going to be sad if that actually occurs. So, one thing about travel I found is it always brings out the worst in people. There's no doubt about that. I've seen some horrific things travelling, I can tell you. So, I did a bike race once in the West Indies, a little place called Guadalupe, and 40 to 50 degrees every day, stinking hot. A hilly little island, and a guy got knocked off. He was leading the race. I was not far behind him, and he'd been knocked off and he'd been badly injured, and people were jumping the fence and they were just dragging everything out of his pockets. And I was just horrified. Here's this guy who turned out was 40
What would he have had in his pockets?
That's it. He had, he had, sometimes he'll take a wallet. These days they take a phone. Yeah. Things of really no real value, but their first thought wasn't, hey, let's help this guy, which I thought they were.
Well, these are the people on the island.
Yes, unfortunately.
I've heard some interesting things about Guadalupe.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there, and I guess we live in a very fortunate country where, poverty is very different in context to places like that. So, but I don't think it was stealing to get the food because they were hungry. There was just a different attitude towards people in need. Yeah. And the first instinct wasn't to help.
No, it was to look after yourself.
Yeah. Trying to steal his bike and the water bottle and, watch off his arm and the whole lot. So that horrified me. So I got into a bit of a fight because I stopped and tried to drag 3 or 4 of them off at the time. So yeah. Which when you're 58 kilos wringing wet's not a good thing.
That's true. This is true. Did you get any backup from the other riders or anything like that?
Oh, there was plenty. The team car sort of helped out. Yeah. So unfortunately, I think there's been a bit of a quantum shift in attitudes of human beings around the world, particularly in Australia, which I hope doesn't continue.
Yeah, 100%. It's been a testing time for humanity over the past 12 months, and I think in times of crisis or in times of stress, you find out people's true colours anyway. Something I learned early on from leadership courses, I've referenced as a teacher, a friend I knew was called Jim Patchett. Great guy, in his 60s when I met him. Just took life in his stride, really admired the bloke, just never fazed by anything. So we had this, you got this multi-million-dollar campus, you got all the latest sports stuff, and here he is in a shed on the side of it with just literally something right next to the forest, and just all the simple pleasures. And I remember saying to Jim, we'd be doing all these team building activities and these like funny little games, and I said to Jim one day, I said, look Jim, I said, I'm not being funny, but what has all this got to do with sports science? And he says, well, it's got everything to do with it. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you get a team of corporate people, he says, in suits, and you put them in this ring here and you start playing games like this, or you throw them off the edge of a cliff, he says, you get them to scale a rock face or go through a cave, because you actually find out who people really are. And he said, it's not just taking out their environment, but it's putting them into an environment that is not only different, but is challenging. And he says, and that's how you build leadership.
Yeah.
And that's a very important attribute in life. And I'll never forget that in my time with him. And he was always great for counsel. And he said to all the students, he goes, if you have it's a bit too much, he goes, just come in. He goes, we'll have a cuppa. And he was an unofficial therapist in many respects. But a man that had seen so much life, but understood probably the simplicity of it better than a lot of those who were blinded by it.
I think in life, if I use sporting context for a second, we're getting to a point where there's some fundamental physical limits that we're starting to approach.
Yes.
The training's exceptional, the nutrition's exceptional, the people are extreme. There's the book, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, or I'd actually rename it. I'd call it the 7 Habits of Highly Fucked Up People, because people that are world class are generally quite extreme personalities.
Yes.
And so genetically we're hitting the edge now. So that psychological difference, I believe, is where the biggest inroads are going to be made moving forward. I've been to a million business breakfasts and sports luncheons and heard every psychologist under the sun. Never been a huge fan of them. But there was one I remember many years ago. A guy, I think he was a sports psychologist for the Brisbane Broncos. And the moment he started talking, he got my attention, and everything he said resonated with me. And there was 2 really key points he made that I'll never forget. Again, about psychology of things. He said, there's 300 people in this room, and if I got a plank of wood that's 30 feet long and and only 2 feet, 3 inches wide, and I put it on the floor and said, walk from one side to the other. He goes, most of you could do it without falling over. If I stuck it on top of a high-rise building, 90% of you are going to fall off. He said the task itself hasn't changed. You're still walking across a plank.
Yes.
But he said your mind gets in the way, and that that's the limiting factor, is the brain. And at the time, there was a famous. His second story was Sally was a rower. Remember, there was a lady in the Olympics, laid back in the Olympics, and it was a four weight team, Australia, in the final, or 8 even, and mid race, this lady just stopped paddling. And I think she laid back.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of reviews on it, and
there was
on TV. Yeah,
and he said they made a very big mistake there. He said what they did there is they taught her how to avoid a situation happening where her brain just shut down. He said it's the wrong thing to do. He said what we need to teach you how to do is how to deal with that situation when it comes up, because especially in an extreme environment like Olympic rowing, eventually you're going to hit that situation, and her brain didn't know what to do. So they didn't give her the skills to deal with that situation. They taught her how to avoid it. And that was something I really learned from that discussion. Is you've got to be prepared for situations. And I learned from cycling, the opportunity knocks at the weirdest times as well. Often when you're not ready for it. So you need to be mentally prepared to take those things on.
Some great metaphors in there, that's for sure. The plank one resonates as well. I think, like you said, it's the ideologies we create in our head. Because like you said, fundamentally the task hasn't changed. And with sports psychology, I think that's going to be one of the areas where we do progress. If anything, back in the day, you look at the physiques, how they've changed. The rugby blokes now, and even the kits and everything, and they got it's nutrition, precision, it's injury rehab, you've got cryogenic therapy, you've got everything. And people, where's
guys
it
120 kilos who are running 10, 11 second, it's incredible the momentum they're creating.
It is. It's an exciting time to be alive. And you just wonder, where is that going? And guess to retrace and go back to, like you said, the book, and people are becoming perhaps too mechanistic and robotic to the point where it's almost like technology. It's an amazing tool and it's going to keep progressing, but almost sometimes you have to go back to go forward, to appreciate what you have, and then also to humanize things back again, to the point where a lot of young people can't have a conversation because they're just too busy technologically, or they're too busy on dating apps. People don't know what to do when they meet up with people anymore. I'm not saying we, because I wouldn't say that as a human race, but I think there's a sector that is almost negating the basics that we forget. And like you said, it's with business. People are just so like, got to be on the grind, got to be doing this, got to be doing that. It's like, you're missing the whole point, mate.
Yeah.
And I've been reminded that as of late with a couple of books that I've read, because I'm like you, I'm very just, people who know me is just fucking 100 miles an hour. And I've had to sort of go, well, I still want to be ambitious and I still want to achieve what I want to achieve, and making sure that I am aligned with my goals, and I think that's a key thing, but also making sure that I've got regular downtime throughout the days and also on the weekends or whatever it is through the weeks, because it doesn't have to be the weekend for me. Every day that ends in a Y is what you make it. But also then going, well, hey, it's okay to not have structure and just wing it on these days or these times, because you're so structured in every area, which is great, because like you said, you need metrics and business targets and things like that. You can't just guess. But at the same time, you need to have this contrast where you can just be like, hey, like, what am I going to do today? Like, who am I going to, like, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just going to go out and just see what happens. Or, you know what, feel like riding my bike, do that. You know what, I'm going to have a go on the drums or on the piano. And I think that's where, like you said, a lot of people who are truly successful understand that, because they have that keyword balance, where, or that at some point they can switch off, where you get these people who are just so robotic, where it's like, hey, like, do you really want to, like, if you were that person, you probably wouldn't want to be there, because it's just very, very, I don't know, narcissistic and very...
The old saying, it's lonely at the top, and it's true. You know,
yeah.
Regardless of the context, it's very, very true. I mean, the things you've got to do to get there are extreme. I mean, I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but plenty of studies on this that, you know, it takes 10 years for someone to be world class at whatever they do. And that's, you know, the thing about that 10 years is that's 10 committed, highly focused, highly obsessive years to get to that point on the back of talent.
Yes.
You know, and professional sportsmen are crap partners, because they have to be selfish. They've got to train, they've got to come home and jump on the couch and rest and sleep.
Yeah.
You know, and when people set goals, I always say you've got to be realistic and you've got to be honest. You know, I think that whether it is you just want to lose a little bit of weight, or you actually want to become a world champion, you know, you've got to sit down and say, okay, what is my goal? Define it. What are the steps I've got to take to get there? And then I think you have to review it and say, okay, what's the cost going to be for me to do this? Be it personal, be it financial, be it whatever it might be. You know, am I first of all prepared to actually put in what I've just written down here? And second of all, if you're a family man, or you're in a relationship, it's like, well, is my family going to be okay with what I'm about to do here? You know, I mean, somebody's put on 50 kilos and needs to dedicate themselves to losing it. It's going to be pretty busy doing it. So I think sometimes you've got to have that discussion with people around you, and again, creating that environment. You know, do I want to do it? Are they okay with me doing it? Can I get support from them? Here's what I need to do to get through this. Are you guys okay with it? You know, and I don't think enough people actually, again, it's that thought process. It's like, think through what it is you're about to take on. It's always bigger than you think it is.
Yes.
Guaranteed.
Yes.
You know? Here we are 4 years into this project, and it should have taken 2. That's a big difference, you know. And we haven't fundamentally done anything wrong. We've had, you know, global circumstances, including COVID, have affected that business. But, you know, that's what happens in life. You know, we're optimistic creatures. We think it's going to take 3 months, it takes 4 months.
Yeah, if I've learned anything, whatever you think it takes, times it by 10.
Yeah.
And then you might be close.
Yeah. Software development, we say, you know, estimate your time, double it again. That's the standard rule in software development, and it's usually still wrong.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, I mean, that's probably one of the last topics I wanted to speak about before we wrap up, which is the current project, which is very exciting. We talked about it at that evening. Give us a bit of an insight on what you can share on the magnitude of the project, what you're doing, and sort of the innovations of it, because it's very, very unique. But at the same time, it seems like I can't believe no one's thought of it. Yeah. Like, it's really like even for me, not in that world, it's like it makes a lot of sense. With like you said, the technological aspect being so rife.
Yeah, look, I think that you know, it's a technology play, and we're early stage. So there's some things I can't say at this point from a competitive standpoint. For sure. But one of the things we decided to do was, you know, we're developing a platform that people can use. We've developed from scratch. You know, so we're not using 30-year-old legacy code, 20-year-old ideas and methodologies. It's all brand new, cutting-edge technology that's trying to be a little bit forward-thinking in what it does, very holistic in its approach, and it's combining together a lot of different pieces to make the whole puzzle very, very complete and whole. And I think that's the key point of difference. It's got to be a good product that you're selling, of course, but it's also got to be measurable. So analytics and reporting is incredibly important. You need to be able to market your product more so today than ever before, and in the online space, which is very, very busy and very competitive.
A lot of noise.
Yeah. Again, you've got to look at the risk side of things as well. So it takes a very risk and compliance based approach to the business as well. Operational considerations. So it's a large platform. It's multi-language, multi-currency. So we can basically sell any lottery product as such in any country in the world, in any language, in any currency. So. So it's
where do you start with something like that?
Like with everything else, you got to take the first step, isn't it? Really, it's like have a big goal, but what's the first step in getting to that point? I think it's the analysis paralysis you talked about before. It's like, okay, I'm at point A, I need to get to point Z, and that's a long way away. How do I get there? And they're trying to get to to 3/4 of the way through that process at first. You've got to break it into logical chunks, and each of them's a separate project on its own, with its own goals and milestones, its own planning around it. So it's very hard when you're doing something that is new, particularly from a technology point of view, to plan it out appropriately, because you just don't know. You're actually breaking new ground.
Yeah, there's nothing to reference it with. There's no sounding board. It's like you will be the first people within this space to do what you are doing.
Yeah. So look, it's a complete product where it offers all the usual gambling products. Little online scratches, you can scratch it on your phone, those types of things. You can play the big lotteries, as I mentioned, around the world. So, I mean, again, it's staggering to think that in the US you've got 2 draws this week coming up that you can literally win $1 billion Australian playing. It's a phenomenal amount of money, for a fairly small wager. So
very much so.
I like lottery as a product because it's a soft gambling product. People are spending a few bucks to try and win a very large amount of money. As opposed to sitting in a poker machine for 4 hours and losing the car and the house and everything else. So so responsible gambling is a big part of that as well. So it's a global project with global reach, and hence I have the setup I do in the house, because most of what I do is technology based and talking to people that aren't even in this country.
Yes.
So
I imagine there's a lot of people involved to make this project happen.
There has. I mean, and it's I go back to falling back on my cycling days. It's using all the things I learnt there again. The goal setting, the planning, the structuring. The ability to go long and hard sometimes. I mean, we've got people in Europe and people in North America, so there isn't a quiet period of the day where something's not going on.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I've had to juggle, and it's hard because there's no off.
Literally.
Yeah. At all.
What was was there a protagonist behind this, or was this an idea that you'd had for a long time that you were just stewing on and you blended it, or was it very much, wow, this is something I need to do? I think we'd always been involved in the lottery as a business, and liked lottery as a product, and it was kind of bringing together a number of different skill sets that I think that we had internally, as opposed to people with various aspects of the platform. We had most of the skill sets we needed. We've invested in some companies around the world, so we had access to people that we probably wouldn't have in Australia as well. And the beauty of a global project that's technology based is you can hire somebody in some far fun place and anywhere in the world. Literally, if they've got a computer and an internet connection. Guadeloupe, no.
You never know. So, and I really enjoy the multicultural side of it. So,
it's good.
So it's it brings its own challenges and dynamics, but you can really cherry pick the people from around the world that are very good at what they do.
Yeah.
Australia's got a lot of very talented people, but it's a big planet.
Exactly. And why not be resourceful where you can?
Yeah.
Like you said, with the contacts you've made, the experiences you've had, you sort of go, well, okay, what do I need for this part of the project? You know what? This person happens to be in this location, but it's more about what does that skill set bring to the table?
Yeah.
How does it complement the bigger picture? It's like an orchestra, isn't it? You sort of got everyone there. You got the triangle. You got this. You're sort of like orchestrating this big, eventual sort of masterpiece, which is easier said than done. But I'm sure it'll be very rewarding.
I look at what I do, and it's probably project managing and problem solving. So, managing a team of people on different parts of the planet with different ideas and thoughts and methodologies and everything else, but also the problem solving. It's, again, when you're breaking new ground, and this is a fundamental issue I have with the current generation, which my daughter is, who I love. But I had a discussion with her teacher once, and he said the kids of today have lost the ability to solve problems. They Google everything. The answer at their fingertips. So when you give them a problem that they can't Google, they don't know what to do. So he said they've lost that ability. So that's something I try and instill in the people that I work with, which is, sometimes we are solving this problem from scratch, and it's one of our points of difference if we can do that. So too many people, again, just give in and go too hard.
Yeah. Okay, so good question then. How do you approach a problem that you can't Google, or what is your process of problem solving generally? Do you have a structure or plan, or do you just, it's very unique every time?
I think the approach is probably similar. It's like, okay, again, what's the big picture problem, and what are the smaller things that I need to do to actually achieve the outcome I want, and then tackling each of those individually. I just, like I say, always take the first step. I have a large notepad that I use. Even though I'm a tech head, I still like to write on paper, and I'll just scribble with a pencil. I'm rubbing a lot of things out. I'm just trying things. No, it doesn't work. What about if I went down this path?
Creating action.
It is, yeah. So, but it's doing something. The moment you stop writing, it's like the writer's block. The moment you stop writing, you're useless at that point.
Yeah.
So anything's better than nothing.
Yeah. Hence the scribbles.
Yeah.
It's like eventually something will come through.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Look, before we wrap it up, you've been very generous with your time. As always, I like to ask some rapid fire questions. They're a bit more fun, light heart. Some of them are going to be, most of them are going to be relevant to what we spoke about, and I'm sure you might draw some things. And the first one is, and I think you'll enjoy this, especially because we're a bit sort of, in Australia we've got it good, but we still can't travel as much, is if you could wake up anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be? Have you got a happy place, a certain location that really just tugs on the heartstrings?
No, it's going to sound really wanky, but I love London. I was born in the UK, so I love London.
Yeah.
LA was a city that I did not like at all until I got to know LA, and now I love LA. Los Angeles, New York's definitely a place I love. So they're probably the three major. San Francisco is a great place too. They all have their own qualities, There's no one place that I think I would live forever. I think Gold Coast, as I said, will always be home. But if I had to pick three, it probably would be the wanky ones being London, LA, New York.
Yeah. Yeah, great locations. Yeah. The heartbeats of the universe in many respects.
I love to snowboard, so if I could wake up right now, because usually this time of the year my wife and I are in Japan snowboarding. So I noticed
you posted it on your Instagram actually.
Yeah. So I'd be in Japan right now. That's the answer.
Fantastic. Whereabouts specifically in Japan?
It's a little local town called Nozawa Onsen. So it's on the main island of Japan, about 2.5 hours on a bullet train north.
Yep.
And is geographically blessed. So it's having snowboarded all around the world, I'm telling you, Japan is the best place to ski and snowboard. Light, fluffy powder. I will add it to my list. I've still not been to Japan, but I've heard many good things. Not only about the snow, but also the culture, the people, the community. It is phenomenal. My next question is to do with books. I've seen a library of books, not only behind us, but when you were showing me a bit of the man cave before as well. Do you have a favourite book or books that you recommend to other people or that you would gift, or a book that you have read that has been influential? What comes to mind? Because there's probably a lot. Yeah, I don't read fiction. I'm the guy who loves to watch a documentary on TV, so I read non-fiction. I love biographies. I love true stories, whether it be business or sporting. So it's real life. I probably couldn't pick one book that stood out to me off the top of my head. There's one book I recommend more than any other book on the planet, and this is to new parents. It's called The Contented Little Baby Book. So if you're about to have a child or you've got one, I should get a commission for this thing, because I think I've handed out about 30 of these things. So, but in general, no, there's never been one book that's really grabbed me. Yeah. They've all got their qualities. Well, that's the thing. It's hard to narrow it down to one, and I think it depends on where you're at the minute, because I reflect on. If someone asks me that, I go, well, "What's the books I've been reading as late?" Or I seem to go to Happiness Advantage. It always just seems to be one that's like, whoa, for me. But yeah, there is. I think there's a lot you can learn, or we can learn from books if people spend a little bit more time. Yeah, definitely book one. And my last question, which I think you will enjoy as someone who is creative in the arts. If you could pick a few people, up to 3 or 4, dead or alive, to sit at the table and have dinner with, who would you pick to sit around the table with? Are you talking about creative people, or are you talking about anyone? It could be anyone, but I imagine
I'm just making an assumption, which can be dangerous, that you may have a musician of some sort there, but I don't know. Based on prior conversations, we didn't really get into too much music, but again, there's so many avenues we could go down.
I think if I had to pick one musician, I'd probably pick Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters. Yeah. I think for a few reasons. Here's a guy who, again, has had many facets to his career, from drumming to guitar to singing, songwriting, and I think everyone talks about him being the hardest working man in rock and roll. So I think he's earned his place in life. So he's probably number one. Wow, that's a tough one.
It is.
I'd want to go for crazy. I'd have Dave Grohl. I'd probably pick Usain Bolt.
This would be great though, wouldn't it? Because imagine the personalities too. Oh yeah. Like the conversations. Yeah. But go on, sorry, continue.
So Dave Grohl, Usain Bolt. Who else would I have? And just to throw a random there, I'd probably have Bill Clinton. Because I can imagine the stories would be told between those three guys. A rocker, and a professional athlete, and a politician who couldn't keep his dick in his pants. So that'd be an interesting dinner.
That'd be an interesting podcast. I'd love to set up a fly on the wall with that one. Yeah. Which is interesting. And the last question, Wayne, that I ask all of my guests is before we finish, and it's a bit more sentimental in nature. And it's, if you could identify a fear that you've had in life, whether it's big or small, what was the fear? Why did it stop you, and how have you overcome it, or are you still battling against it?
Fear. I don't really have, when you talk about physical fears, I don't think I really have any. I don't like the idea of burning to death in a car, don't get me wrong, or drowning, but I don't have a fear of snakes or spiders and those types of things. I think that for me it's probably just more a fear of not having a go. That I don't want to die wondering. I want to be able to lie back in my last moments and go, you know what, I had a good crack. Whatever I had a crack at, whatever I did, I went hard and I gave it a good crack, whether it worked or it didn't. A fear of not trying, I think, is probably the answer to the question.
Yeah. And that seems to be the unanimous answer.
Oh, really?
Which is, I'm finding more and more interesting after, what are we now, 70 odd podcasts in. And even just my conversations, I ask that question in sorts to people, and every single person, it's always the same, which is telling me one main thing here. Every person that wants to achieve something in life has a fear of failure or not having a go. Yes. It's the fear of missing out. Yeah. And that perhaps is the reason why you are successful in what you do. Because you always feel that there needs to be more, or if I don't, what could have been. And I think the whole sitting down one day or even tomorrow and going, could I have done better, could I have done more, which again, it's a double-edged sword, but better to be on the side of being two steps ahead and having a go and going, well, you know what, if it's over, at least I had a go, rather than going, shit, there was a lot of stuff I really wanted to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I said before, I'm not afraid to fail. I mean, I don't like it. Nobody does, but it doesn't stop me from actually trying in the first place, and that's the key. I mean,
that's the difference.
Failure always hurts. I don't care who you are. If you say it doesn't, you're lying, or you really didn't care in the first place. Yeah. So, yeah. No.
I appreciate it. I think that's an appropriate way to sum up what's been a very varying array of conversation. I think a lot of golden nuggets in there as well.
It's been great. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
But I appreciate your time, Wayne. Now, I don't know if there's things that you do on social, or if you're very sort of, I guess, extrinsic with putting information out, but if there are people who want to reach out, and perhaps whether it's business, or they want to work with you, or they want to understand more about products and projects, is there a space where they can go to connect with you?
Not really. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I'm not huge on the social side of things. We certainly use that from a work perspective. I don't have a website personally, so no, not really.
There you go. Go for me if they've got a question, post it in the comments.
Alex, go through Alex.
It's a bit like, isn't it? Something that always fascinates me though, again, about a sector or a community of people who do really well are people that don't have big followings or are not massively prevalent on social media. And there's this whole ideology lately where people go, oh, the following equals the income, and it just isn't true at all. I think a lot of the most successful people are people who you wouldn't find in the social space, but yet they're so big in the technological space too. So there's that sort of.
And it's weird. I definitely like to help people. I mean, I've helped many friends over years with business projects and ideas, and and if anybody's got any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to talk to them. No problem at all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So guys, if you do have any questions, put them in the comments or reach out, and we can get them answered. It'll be fantastic. But Wayne, thank you again.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, mate. Appreciate the knowledge. Guys, for everyone watching, as always, I've got to say it, make sure if you are watching on YouTube, like, comment if you've got something positive or you've got a question. Again, make sure to subscribe. I know you're watching, so click that subscribe button, hit the bell icon for weekly videos. And if you're listening on Spotify or on iTunes or whatever medium, if it is safe to do so and you're not driving or riding the old bike, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and make sure you share it around as well so more people can learn from the knowledge. And of course, until the next episode, guys, stay fearless.